Welcome to the board meeting of the Board of School Directors of the School District of Springfield Township. We had an executive session this evening at 6:15 to discuss a legal matter. So welcome everyone, and could we have roll call, please? Ms. Michaels?
Yes, Mr. Bedard.
Here.
Mr. DeFranco.
Here.
Dr. Etlin.
Here.
Ms. Jordan. Mr. Needleman.
Here.
Mr. Lapidus. Ms. Sarsfield.
Here.
Ms. Lipinski.
Here.
Dr. Taratusky.
Here. And could we all please stand for the Pledge of Allegiance? I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. And a reading of the mission statement. The mission of the School District of Springfield Township is to educate and develop all students and as learners and citizens who are high achieving, resilient, and responsible in a changing global community. As we did roll call, we will now make time for public comments on our agenda items. If there's anyone who wishes to speak this evening, you can use the hand raise feature. And if you're called on, please state your name and where you reside in the township. Just for information, the agenda can be found in the chat, or the link to the agenda can be found in the chat. So we'll give a minute for those who would like to speak. All right. I don't see anyone that anyone is wanting to speak this evening. There will be another public comment period towards the end of the meeting on non-agenda items. We have one addition to the agenda this evening, and that is a report of a property committee meeting. Mr. Needleman, could you share that, please?
Sure. Thank you, Dr. Taratusky. Good evening, everyone. We had a property committee meeting on March 25th, and I want to provide a summary of the things that were discussed. There are a few things. I'll try to run through them as quickly but as comprehensively as I can. I'm going to save the most important one for last because that's how I do things. First off, the good news is the high school project is almost completely done. The high school construction project is just at a final closeout phase, which is just a few punch list items left. Same thing for the new Enfield project. There are just a few punch list items left, and that project will be completely done. I don't know how many of you have seen the new signs that are up on the at the entrance to the Enfield school itself by the parking lot, and on the corner of Paper Mill Road and Montgomery Avenue. But it really looks spectacular, and all kudos go to Dr. Yanuko and her staff and just everybody involved. It looks phenomenal. And as somebody who's a 6-year-old is a student at Enfield and getting to see it almost every day, it really is just I'm jealous, frankly. I wish I could have gone to a school like that. It's fantastic. Anyway, speaking of which, on May 21st, there's going to be a grand opening. Invitations have, the flyer, I guess, has been published, and invitations will start going out soon. And I want to take this opportunity to just encourage everybody who can possibly come out. I think it starts at 9 o'clock in the morning. There will be a ribbon cutting ceremony. There will be some remarks. There will be some snacks provided and things like that. It'll be just fantastic. So please do come out if you can. Speaking of the new Enfield project, there is some traffic studies being done. Speaking of the student at Enfield, there are some traffic studies being done about trying to decrease some of the congestion on the corner or at the corner of Bethlehem Pike and Montgomery Avenue, and trying to increase some safety at that corner and also at the corner of Bethlehem Pike and Montgomery Avenue. When those studies are completed and recommendations are ready, of course, they'll be shared and we'll have an opportunity to discuss them and to vote on them, of course. Finally, also, I forgot about this. There are going to be some warning signals posted along Montgomery Avenue in front of the school and nearby the school to try to encourage some slower driving for obvious reasons. In addition, the district has been working with some outside groups who are going to be wanting to use or who are using some of the school facilities, and that work is ongoing. Finally, before I get to the most important bit, there are some summer 2021 projects in the works, and as events develop and as more details become available, we can share this as well. Finally, the old Enfield project. There's a new Enfield and the old Enfield. It's kind of like whatever the right metaphor is. The plan is, of course, to raise that RAZ, that building, and there's a great plan to turn it into some athletic fields for the middle school students and a general purpose field and some amphitheater space as well. There's a possibility that that project has been delayed just a bit by some requirements that may or may not be imposed by the Township Planning Commission in connection with it granting a permit to start getting the work done. The district has authorized or asked its solicitor to begin some of that work in finding out what those details are like and what will be involved. As I don't mean to be coy about this, we just don't have a whole lot of detail yet on what the final outcome is going to look like. When we do, of course, we'll discuss it, we'll vote on it, we'll make it available to the public as soon as something is finalized. That concludes my report. Thanks for your patience. I know that was a lot, but thank you.
Thanks, Mr. Needleman. Are there any questions from any of the board members about the property committee minutes or issues? Okay. All right. Thank you. Now we'll have administrative report. Dr. Mary Jo Yanuko.
Thank you, Dr. Teretusky, and hello, everyone. As you know, today was a big day for our students and staff across the district as we expanded in-person access to 4 days per week in grades K through 12. As of today, 94% of students at Enfield, 88% of students at Erdenheim, 82% of students at the middle school, and 72% of students at the high school are attending in person. In addition, 80% of our Eastern students are attending in person. I want to recognize and thank our staff for their diligence in preparing for today, which included the movement of furniture out of storage and back into classrooms by our maintenance crew over spring break, disinfection of all surfaces by our custodians, classroom setup and organization by teachers and instructional support staff, review and adjustment of transportation routes and busing attendance charts by our drivers and transportation office staff, expansion of lunch offerings by food services, as well as numerous other elements of planning by our administrative assistants and building leaders. Today felt in many ways like the first day of school, and it has been both exhilarating and exhausting for our staff. I'd also like to thank our families and students for their continued adherence to all health and safety measures. We are tremendously grateful that our local positivity rate is at 3.7%, and our incidence rate is at 76.38. These numbers are as of today, and that is the lowest we have experienced in many, many months. Unfortunately, Montgomery County's rates are rising, currently at 8.1% positivity and 163.7 incidents per 100,000 residents. This reminds us of the importance of maintaining vigilance in our actions both in school and in the community, so that we may avoid outbreaks that would require us to again reduce density in our schools by reducing the number of days of in-person access. We will continue to work with the MCOPH in order to ensure the health and safety of our students and staff, and appreciate the ongoing compliance of the community in supporting these efforts. The second thing I'd like to report is this evening the board has the opportunity to approve the motion to appoint Dr. Megan Markle as the new principal of Enfield Elementary School. Dr. Markle has served our district very well at Erdenheim for 4 years, and we are excited to be able to offer her the opportunity to lead her own building team. Dr. Markle is a former elementary teacher and instructional coach, and as such will be a strong educational leader for the state. She is dedicated to our mission and vision of creating a community of belonging for our students and their families, and she is a highly skilled and well-respected member of our administrative team. Next Thursday, there will be an opportunity for our Enfield families to hear Dr. Markle's leadership vision and to ask questions at a virtual meet and greet at 6 p.m. That's Thursday, April 15th. The meeting link will be sent to families at the end of this week in Dr. Feely's e-blast. Next, I'd like to just invite all members of our community to our next Equitable Practices meeting, which will be on Wednesday, April 21st at 6:30 p.m. The meeting will be virtual and will focus on the experiences of our English learners and their families as members of our school community. We will also provide an update on our curriculum review process as it relates to inclusivity and share progress on our internal equity audit subcommittee work. A little bit of good news for the district in the last few days. At the middle school, the Odyssey the Amine team qualified for states after earning second place in their division. This is the first time in 5 years that the team is going to the state competition based upon an 8-minute play about a virtual Odyssey the students wrote, directed, and performed. During their performance, the character unknowingly enters a virtual reality world where they encounter a nefarious creature. The character collects credits in order to escape to the real world. As part of the world, the students designed and built various technical effects, which include changing something that is 2-dimensional into 3-dimensional. We wish them good luck in the state competition. In addition, and just out today, for the 8th consecutive year, the School District of Springfield Township has been recognized by the National Association of Music Merchants as one of the best communities for music education in the United States. This is due not only to our wonderful and talented students, but to the dedication and expertise of their teachers, our music educators. Many thanks to each of them for this honor. And finally, we have our Spartan Spotlight this evening, which is on student achievement. In recent months, much has been published regarding learning loss of students as a result of the pandemic. Debate exists as to whether school districts should focus on students' loss of core skills in reading, writing, and math, or whether we should celebrate their growth in skills such as resilience, empathy, and independence. Our team has chosen to do both. We recognize that the unique challenges of the past year will require us to identify strategies for helping students to acquire those skills that were stalled, as well as capitalize on the strengths that our students have developed. Dr. Johnston has been working this winter with our building principals, instructional coaches, and staff leadership to assess the impact of the pandemic on student achievement. And our spotlight tonight is a summary of our findings presented by Dr. Johnston.
Thank you, Dr. Yanuko. Good evening, everyone. It's very nice to be here with you. Thank you for inviting me to present and share this information with you. First, I want to start by thanking all of you and our community, family, and staff for all their flexibility, patience, and understanding throughout this past year. I think none of us could have imagined a year ago sort of where we would be now. And I am struck by the beginning of spring, remembering last year looking out my windows, watching spring come upon me while I was working from home. So it really has been a full year and we have lots to talk about. I'm happy to be able to share with you and provide some insight into how our students are performing. So let me remember to share my screen. Sorry about that. There we go. Can you see all that? Can you see that? Okay. We wanted to talk with you about how our students were performing, and we thought for a long time about the best ways to do this. As Dr. Yanuko reflected, the challenge of this is to consider students in a holistic way. What are the ways in which students have performed during COVID-19? And so we looked at systems and strategies that as a school district, we regularly use to examine student performance when we have concerns. And we use an MTSS framework. MTSS is multi-tiered systems of support. And it's a way to look at students in a consistent, evidence-based way in their performance in school, not only in terms of curriculum and assessment and their performance academically, but their attendance in school and their behavior and social emotional needs. Certainly over the last year, there have been lots of things that have impacted their performance. And we're considering that not only in terms of those areas of development and growth, but also through the lens of how have they received their education over the past year. So thinking about our instructional platforms that we've used over the last year, we've had quite a story just this academic year. I'll remind you that we began our year as 100% virtual. Within 3 weeks, though, we began to bring in our students 4 days a week for those individuals who had significant low incidence disabilities and required the time and attention of direct personnel to be with them. We were committed throughout the year to find ways to increase access to in-person instruction. Dr. Yanuko and I are both reflecting on how every time we've seen an increase of that opportunity and more families have shown some trust and been interested in bringing their students in, which we'll look at in a second. In February and March, we had the opportunity to increase access to 4 days a week for some students. Each building leader worked with their team to find evidence-based ways using a rubric of performance to bring in as many students as the space would allow while maintaining that 6 feet of social distancing. And as Dr. Yanuko reflected this morning, we had the wonderful pleasure to have our first day of school when we returned as many students as possible to 4 days a week in person. We are also proud to be able to maintain a virtual option for those families who are still just not comfortable sending their student in or believe that their student or their family has great risk and needs to mitigate against that measure. So this has a lot of data on it, this slide for you, but just to want you to see that in each of the buildings, the growing access to in-person instruction across the district. In each building, every time we've had an opportunity to come into school, more students have moved from the virtual platform to the in-person. Today's numbers, as Dr. Yanuko referenced earlier, reflect our 2-day and 4-day-a-week students coming in together. And our virtual students, while still present, are increasingly decreasing. They're decreasing the number of students we have virtually. One of the things that is also very important to both Dr. Yanuko and I, and we've spent a lot of time talking about, is trying to understand from the students' perspectives how they've been managing throughout this entire experience. Because what we know is that it's more than just the academics for our students, it's their student life and their experience. And one of the more complex issues that we've confronted this year is the idea of asynchronous Wednesdays. And so when Dr. Yanuko and I had the chance to meet with advisory groups at the middle school and high school, as we do each month, we had the chance to ask them about their experience with asynchronous Wednesdays. And the students were really clear about why they think it's such a good opportunity. Truth be told, those students are actively rallying for us to continue to find some way to allow them some independence during the school day. So we're willing to hear them out, but there might be some interesting ways. They've been enjoying taking things at their own pace, being able to demonstrate and practice their own independence. And they really have enjoyed learning to be more organized and more self-reliant. And they are relying on each other to solve problems. And so I thought it was really interesting to hear what the students had to say about their experience with asynchronous Wednesdays. One of the other ways we look at how students are doing is their attendance in school. What does that look like? I have to be honest, I anticipated when we pulled these data that I would see a real drop in attendance during this school year as it compared to last year at the same time. But in fact, we were nearly neck to neck in terms of the performance and attendance of students at school. True disclaimer here, this is attendance taken at homeroom at the start of the day. But like any activity where students don't necessarily stay engaged all day, they attended to homeroom, and that is how we report attendance. Additionally, in Pennsylvania this year, although that may not be true in the future, right now, If the student is expected to attend in person but participates virtually, they are marked present if they were present in homeroom virtually or in person. So that equates to why we're seeing such high percentages here. Another way we want to look at how students are doing is in their social, emotional, and behavioral functioning. Many of you know that my background is working with students with a variety of needs. And so one of the things that I think about when we talk about social, emotional development and behavior is students communicate how they're doing in the world through their behavior. And so as a part of that, we wanted to think about how are students feeling and what kind of supports do they need? We have much concern and much has been written and talked about in terms of student mental health. So what does that mean in terms of how they're showing up to us in school? One of the first ways that we measure that is discipline. And I, again, anticipated that we might see some spikes in discipline issues. Maybe we would have issues around mask wearing or social distancing or following through with our mitigation strategies or requests to separate. There have been nearly none. Students have been well behaved, managing themselves, and doing what's expected of them when they are in school. And so I thought that was a real credit to our families and our students and our staff to keep students actively engaged in such an unusual year. Our school social emotional programs, I wanted to think about and we wanted to examine whether or not students were accessing more or in need of greater support than they have been in the past. And what we actually found is our referrals to our community-based provider for school-based outpatient counseling services have been relatively steady this year. In fact, there was a little bit of a drop-off because the services were provided virtually through telemedicine. And our SAP program, our student assistance program, also has consistently been able to deliver virtual individual and group services. And while there has been some decrease in services, we actually anticipated, given all we had heard about mental health, we would have seen a higher request for those services and a greater need. And in fact, we've been able to meet those needs with our school staff and our outside providers. Again, suggesting that our students are managing themselves through this experience. And most importantly, we asked the students themselves, how are they managing their own well-being? And they were able to share with us things that have been working for them. But in general, the pace of their year has been a little bit slower. They haven't had as many out-of-school responsibilities or activities. They aren't feeling pulled and torn. So they're able to be a little more centered and present in what they're doing. They have time built into the school day throughout our schools to get much of their work done. And there's been far less homework assigned this year. And they have definitely commented that has been a positive for them. They're recognizing the flexibility and support that they get from their teachers and that they really feel responded to and heard. And because their teachers are a little more available to them, they're able to get rapid communication back and forth. But they admitted it is very easy to procrastinate. It's very easy to get off target and not be organized. And so they've had to work on those skills. The schedule has been, they haven't had the same kinds of schedules and we're changing things and they don't come to school 5 days a week and it's not always the same. And that schedule, having that varied schedule has been complex for some. And in general, they have admitted that sometimes, especially right now, as we go into the 1 year mark, that they're tired of it. They're ready to be back to normal, whatever that might be. And of course, not last or least, but importantly, is how have our students been performing academically, especially when we compare their performance to this time last year. And so we pulled data from a couple of different sources. This year, from kindergarten through 10th grade, we used a STAR assessment. It's the STAR 360. It's our universal screening tool that we use to see how students are doing across the grades. And then we're able to use that data over time to measure year-to-year progress of a cohort. So we did that. We administered that assessment in September. All students took that assessment at home. So there's a lot of variability about their performance because they didn't take it in a school setting with their teacher present. In January, they took that same measure again, which is the results we'll look at today. And we're actually taking that assessment again in June. It was initially scheduled for May. As many of you know, our PSSA and Keystone testing has gotten moved around this year. And as a result of our best laid plans, we have relocated that STAR assessment into the month of June. In addition, we took a look at the first trimester for elementary report cards and the second marking period the secondary marking period 2 report cards, just to take a look at what are some other ways we can get information and functioning on how students are doing. The START early literacy is what we administered for kindergarten and first grade. Emergent readers are those who are just beginning to make sense out of print and recognize that print has meaning. Probable readers are those who are able to decode, make sense out of their words, and recognizing words both in and out of context. And so as you can see, in both kindergarten and first grade, about the same number of students are performing at that probable level. I'm sorry, let me interrupt myself. One of the things I want to make sure I've said is that all of these data points that you're looking at reflect the full range of our students, from our gifted and enriched students, those taking advanced classes, and including those students with disabilities. So this is 100% of student participation in these measures is reflected in these data that you're looking at tonight. We also looked at independent instructional reading levels, where students read one-on-one with their teacher, and we've determined sort of whether they are reading at or above grade level, approaching grade level, or are below grade level. This is a 3-year series of how kindergartners, not the same students, kindergartners have performed over 3 years on these measures. And you can see there's definitely more variability this year in 2021 of those instructional reading levels. We attribute much of that variation to the interruptions and changes young readers have had in the style of their reading instruction. Typically, we focus a lot on guided reading as getting the best bang for our buck in student performance around literacy development. And unfortunately, because of the way in which the schedule has worked and the way in which we've had access to students and the way in which we've kept students separated and not put them in as many small groups, there's been a change to how we've delivered reading instruction. We've also historically relied heavily on our pause time. Those of you who are Enfield families or former Enfield families will be familiar with that, where we've targeted particular areas of need and focused on that. But we've done that across classrooms, and in an attempt to maintain as little interaction class to class as part of our health and safety plan. Prior to March, we were not delivering that service in that way, although beginning in March, when our incidence rates were dropping and we were able to feel comfortable moving students around a little more, we did restart that program in March. So we are actively awaiting our June results to see how students have done once they've had some of those consistent interventions back in place. Here's second grade on their STAR ELA. They did take this measure last year. I told you it was the first year for kindergarten and first grade, but this is the second year that second grade has taken them. As you can see, we have steady results from last year to this year. But again, we're seeing some impact to the instructional reading level, not as significant as KM1, but there is some impact in terms of the performance of those who are at or above grade level. This chart reflects for you the reading performance of students, the same cohort. So how the graduation year is listed below. So that is the current third grade, but it includes their second grade scores from last year and their third grade scores this year. So these are the same children, how they did last year and how they're doing this year. So as you can see, we have steady performance with some targeted years where there's a little more variation. The 2024 year is our 9th grade class. Many of those students were virtual when they took this assessment. And I'm not sure how many of you have teenagers, but we do have some questions on the reliability and the validity of their results because they were taking it at home without adults right on top of them, keeping them focused. But it's a data point that we wanted to consider. I don't believe that only 61 or 51% of our students were reading at grade level, at that level. And this gives you some information on those who are performing below grade level in reading, that same group of third graders to 9th graders. Again, worthy of us continuing to pay attention. Here's math performance. Again, 3rd through 9th grade, 2 years of data, same students compared to themselves. And the at-risk performance, those who are below grade level. In the high school, again, I have concerns around the measures that we use just in terms of the validity, but the best way, the things that kids care most about at the high school are their grades. And so this compares 2 years of grades, how these students did, how 9th graders did in general, in English language arts, in 9th, 10th, 11th, and 12th grade. Again, you can see while there is some variability, it is not extensive. In fact, in some grades, in some groups, we're actually seeing improved performance. Same is true for math. We also looked at some other variables at the high school level. For example, on-time graduation. And as you can see, in the graduation year of 2019, 97% of our students graduated on time. There were 4, because the classes are small, the difference of those who did not graduate on time was 4 students. And so while it looks like there's a big drop into 95%, I want to be clear, there's still 4 students the following year who were not able to graduate. Both Dr. Yanuko and I were a little concerned, and then we went back and looked at the number to make sure that it reflected what we know about our students. And I suspect if we had gone back in time and measured that exactly at this time, we would find that there might be about 10 students who were at risk for not graduating. So you're seeing that lower percentage right now. I anticipate that not all 10 of those students will have difficulty graduating. Our support teams are actively working with the students, their family, and the supports to ensure we've done everything we can to remove any barriers that might exist towards graduation and supporting students in crossing that stage. Other high school comparisons that we like to think about is, how did AP enrollment change this year? We do have fewer students enrolled in AP classes this year, but again, there's lots of reasons as to why that may be the case. There were some calls to the school counselors at the start of the school year when students learned that the courses that we were starting the year virtually, where they asked to move from an AP class to an honors class. They just weren't interested and didn't think they could learn that level of content remotely. That's what some students reported. Others, it was just the kinds of classes that were offered or that they were interested in this year. Our Eastern Center enrollment actually went up this year from 49 to 52. So all in all things being equal, students are performing very consistently with what we have seen in the past at our high school. So then sort of what did we notice and what did we learn? We're very proud to tell you that students are attending and participating in school. They're engaged with their teachers, they're engaged with their peers, and they are demonstrating growth in their learning for nearly all students. The teachers are working to support their students and their families. They all have stories about the ways in which they have done that. Families have been in touch with teachers in new and unique ways this year. I think families have gotten greater insight into how teachers manage their classroom and the kinds of learning our students are expected to do through the virtual experience. We continue to deliver and provide individual supports, programs, and services. In true fashion, though, we have some areas of concern. We're worried about those early literacy skills, and we want to pay attention closely to what happens in June and figure out sort of what impact that's going to have long-term to ensuring our youngest students are getting that solid reading instruction that we pride ourselves on. We also noticed some variability in performance at transition years in 3rd, 6th, and 9th grade, which we'll talk about again in a minute. And then the teachers are really working to ensure that students are, I know one of the worries families have is, will they be ready for the next grade? We often go above and beyond in what we provide to our students within our classrooms. And so we're making sure that they're mastering that content and those standards at the grade level by being efficient and very targeted in our instruction this year so that students are prepared for the next year. Certainly some of the patterns that we noticed, excuse me, that's my screen. The patterns that we noticed require continued examination. Some of the students who have historically been underperforming on some of these measures continue to do so. And we want to, through our data internal equity audit, want to continue to take a look at what that is and why it's happening and try to figure out some ways in which we can remove those barriers. Because some of the preliminary data that we have is consistent with what we've done in the past. And finally, I want to share with you some of our next steps. We're trying to take a very proactive approach here in Springfield Township. One of the things that we have talked about is how can we make sure that we have, for those students who aren't at grade level or other students who aren't where their families had hoped they would be at this point in the year, how can we support them? As many of you know, through our e-blast over the last few days, we're very excited about our Spartan Academy offerings. So we're in the process of building and constructing a vision for those Spartan Academies this summer. We've been very excited about we've had already 200 responses of families expressing interest for their children in attending some form of summer programming. While most of those interested are K to 6th grade, we're also seeing a bump in the 9th grade interest. So I think at those transition years, 3rd, 6th, and 9th, we have a high level of interest. But that said, we have interest K to 12. And so we are in the process of building that out and working to identify a coordinator who will help us plan this summer and get out more information to our families. So we're looking to do these, most of the summer academies, our Spartan academies, this summer in August. I want to thank you so much for your time this evening, and I'll be happy to take any questions you might have.
Thank you, Dr. Johnston, for putting all of that information together. It's really a kind of holistic look at our students, and I know that I certainly appreciate all of the information you provided, as well as the comments from students. I was curious as to how you received their feedback about how this year has gone. How did you obtain that feedback?
Oh, Dr. Yanuko and Dr. Yanuko has invited me to join her student advisory panel groups. So we've got groups this year at the middle school and the high school that we meet with once a month. And we asked them, and they provided it. And we've asked them to make sure that they're touching base with their peers and others around the school so that they're representing a wide perspective when they come and talk with us.
That's great.
Thank you, Dr. Johnston. It was really informative. I did just want to add that I know of at least 2 students, one in the high school, one in the middle school, who desperately want to keep the asynchronous Wednesday. So you can add that to your data point for whatever it's worth.
We've heard it loud and clear, although to the students' credit, this is what is so impressive to me. They are so introspective. They actually argued that it's really a middle school and high school thing. They really felt like elementary students they themselves recognize that elementary students might not be mature enough to do asynchronous Wednesdays and be self-directed and independent enough to do that work, which it just goes to show you that students have a very keen understanding of how the world works and what they know about themselves and their peers.
Yeah, no,
that
that
their
doesn't,
siblings.
yeah, no, that doesn't not make sense. I think that's really interesting.
Mm-hmm.
I've really been impressed. We've now had 2 meetings with each of the groups, and looking forward to continuing this each month and expanding the groups where it's possible to do so when we get back into in-person. They're very reflective about this last year and mature in their approach to, as I mentioned at the beginning, the balance of they know that they've grown in some ways. Some of the students talked about the fact that at the beginning they procrastinated and they were very reliant on their teachers. They didn't feel they could make decisions about how to organize their work without getting support. And now they feel a much greater sense of independence. It was a painful process for them in some cases, but they've moved into a place where they feel so much stronger as students in the way in which they organize themselves and their own ability to make decisions about what they study and how they study. And now granted, these are secondary students, but I'm excited for us to be able to speak now to the elementary students as well, now that they're in the building. I also wanted to just make mention, and Dr. Etlin, I think of you, given your background and expertise in the area of early literacy. One of the areas that Dr. Johnston and I have made very clear is that we recognize, in particular for families who will either take a look at this slide presentation or observe or hear watching tonight, we are committed to students reading on grade level by the 3rd grade. And so we will do everything possible in the next 2 years for those kindergartners and 1st graders to make sure that they reach the levels they should be reaching as they enter Erdenheim. That's our goal. The Spartan Academies are a first step. We're also really optimistic, and I want to make sure it wasn't lost in the midst of the presentation, that those data points were from the mid-year, and you may recall that we had opened for 2 weeks, then we were closed by the county and moved to all virtual. Then we opened for several weeks before the holidays, when we all know that kindergartners and 1st graders are at their most focused in the middle months, weeks of December. And then we were again open for a few weeks in January before the students were assessed. And so we are very optimistic that the data results we will have in June will significantly reduce the number of students who are not reading on grade level by the conclusion of the school year. We'll work with those students and their families if they are interested over the Spartan Academies in August, and then certainly moving into next year. But we are committed as an administrative team. We know the importance of on-time, on-grade level reading by the 3rd grade, and we will make sure that it happens.
Thank you.
Dr. Yanuko, I appreciate you saying that. That was actually the only observation that really alarmed me, was some of the results in that early reading. I wanted to ask Dr. Johnston, in addition to the offering of the Spartan Academies, are we doing targeted outreach to those students who have demonstrated the highest level of risk, to make sure that we're not just offering, but encouraging and supporting on an individualized level?
That's a fantastic question. I think we will, one of the major pieces of feedback I have gotten again has been that families are reticent to commit until they exactly understand what we're going to offer. And I don't know exactly what we're going to offer until I have an understanding of what interest we have. Does that make sense? So we didn't want to go too far down the line of planning a program when we weren't actually sure how much interest there would be there. We've heard from some families, like, they are done. When they cross the line in June, they are taking the summer to recover and coming back in next school year. And so we really wanted to understand what's the way in which families might be interested in such a program. Once we get a little further down the line in the next week or so, and we're able to identify what we'll be doing and how we're going to be operating, and we'll be able to reach out more effectively. I do want to share, I did not say this, and although I've written myself a note to do so, individual students where there have been concerns around their progress or their programming, those needs have been addressed through individual conferences with their family and direct interventions with our reading specialists or other support personnel throughout the year. This was a broad stroke picture, but we have not waited to provide intervention. When we had concerns, our staff activated themselves, worked with the families, and are already delivering those intensive interventions at this time.
That's encouraging. Thank you for clarifying that. I think generally, I think this group has always aligned that the aspirational goals that every student would have an individualized learning plan to the extent that both the family, student, and we can engage. I think this is an opportunity for us to really tighten that idea up for those who are most at risk. So
Agreed.
I would just to be as proactive on that as possible, but appreciate you guys are aligned against that 3rd grade goal.
I do have a question about the 3rd to 9th grade reading information. And as I was looking at the slide across the grades, students who go from grade to grade, it appears as though the overall achievement level decreases by grade. And I'm curious, I did not see that pattern in the math performance that you presented.
Agreed.
But I'm just curious to know if the administrative team has explored that, if that is something that we're going to address. I realize that's not necessarily pandemic related, but it certainly is a observation.
I think that's why we're optimistic to have a tool that will help us measure consistently the same groups of students over time. And what do we notice about those particular students? Are they able to maintain their own performance within their group? And is there something from a curricular standpoint we need to look at more carefully, which is what I anticipate looking at as we continue to gather these data points throughout the school year. And then certainly with the administrative team this summer as a part of our reflection on the year. What are these data telling us? And what kinds of steps and action plans do we want to put in place to begin to look at what we know? So I agree that that's an observation we've made also. I cannot tell you that we've made any specific steps or action steps at this time, but it's definitely something that is intriguing as to why are we seeing those results and how much of that has to do with the age of the student and their engagement in the testing process. Younger students are more compliant about doing what their teachers say and administering that tool. So we want to take a look at what do we know.
Right.
I also, Dr.
Go ahead, Dr. Yanuko.
As a former English teacher, one of the things that I struggle with with regard to the secondary reading assessments is what is it that is being measured? We know over the years that those assessments have changed in the length of the reading passages, increasing focus on nonfiction as well as fiction. What I see and what I observe and what I have discussed for the last few years in my former role with our ELA teachers is that there is a clear development over the course of the secondary schools, over the course of the district, but when we start to see that drop off in a love of literature and an affinity for certain types of books. The students are actively engaged with the librarians and selecting books that are of interest to them. So I feel comfortable in what I've observed with regard to a love of literature. When it comes to proficiency on standardized assessments, I think that we have lots of room for improvement and would like to see us working on that over the next few years without losing the love of literature that is evident in the courses we have at the secondary level.
I have a question. As the data is continued to be explored and reviewed, and I know you just shared that you've had some conferences with some of our at-risk students' parents in terms of their need areas. As the data is continued to be explored, will specific areas be communicated to parents so parents can make a decision prior to the commencement of the Spartan Academy so that they can decide if they're going to pursue private tutoring? So will that occur?
Yes.
Okay, good.
Again, the hope is that those June assessments will shrink the pool of students for whom we have the greatest concern and allow us to provide more targeted direction for families and, quite frankly, for the teaching staff. So our first grade teachers will be looking at those kindergarten results in June, knowing where they might need to reinforce core skills in the start of the first grade year that perhaps in previous years they haven't had to. And now they'll know that those are gaps that have existed and persisted over the course of the last 15, 16 months. But hopefully in the next 10 weeks, we're going to be able to close that gap. And some of those core skills are going to be able to be reinforced such that we'll see improved results. And we do think that will be the case because, as you know, in our primary building, 94% of the kids are now there. And that significantly changes our ability to reach those students and work on their weaknesses.
That's great. Do any of the other board members have any questions for Dr. Johnston or Dr. Yanuko regarding the information? Okay.
Thank you very much.
I appreciate your time. Thank you.
We appreciate it very much. Okay, all right, so let's move on to new business. Personnel. The Board of School Directors approves the following personnel as presented in the attachment: administrative personnel, certificated personnel, support personnel, extra pay for extra responsibilities, and conference workshop attendance. Is there a motion?
Motion.
And a second.
Second.
Any comments or questions? Ms. Michaels?
Mr. Bedard,
Aye.
Mr. DeFranco,
Aye.
Dr. Etlin,
Aye.
Mr. Needleman,
Aye.
Ms. Sarsfield,
Aye.
Ms. Lipinski,
Aye.
Dr. Taratusky.
Aye. Number 2, Enfield Principal. The Board of School Directors approves the change in status of Dr. Megan Markle from Erdenheim Assistant Principal to Enfield Principal, effective May 1st, 2021, at a salary of $126,000 prorated for the 2020-2021 school year. This position is in accordance with the SDST Administrative Compensation Plan. Is there a motion?
Motion enthusiastically.
And a second.
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 Any comments or questions? I just want to welcome Dr. Markle to her new role. We're happy to have members of our district move up into important positions, I feel like it is an opportunity for us to capitalize on the great skills that we have in our administrators. Any other comments or questions from the board? Okay, Ms. Michaels?
Mr. Bedard,
Aye.
Mr. DeFranco,
Aye.
Dr. Etlin,
Aye.
Mr. Needleman,
Very enthusiastic aye.
Ms. Sarsfield,
Aye.
Ms. Lipinski,
Aye.
Dr. Taratusky.
Aye. Number 3, textbook adoption and purchase. The Board of School Directors, as recommended by the Academic Affairs Committee, approves the purchase of 4th grade social studies materials titled Exploring Pennsylvania, Our Geography, History, Economy, and Government, 2nd edition, copyright 2020, from Penns Valley Publisher at a cost of $12,840.30. Is there a motion?
Motion.
And a second.
Second.
Any comments or questions? Okay. Ms. Michaels?
Mr. Bedard,
Aye.
Mr. DeFranco,
Aye.
Dr. Etlin,
Aye.
Mr. Needleman,
Aye.
Ms. Sarsfield,
Aye.
Ms. Lipinski,
Aye.
Dr. Taratusky.
Aye. Number 4, New Hope Academy. The Board of School Directors approves the tuition contract with New Hope Academy and Springfield Township School District for student 2021-0406-01 during the 2020-2021 school year. Is there a motion?
Motion.
And a second.
Second.
Any comments or questions? Ms. Michaels?
Mr. Bedard,
Aye.
Mr. DeFranco,
Aye.
Dr. Etlin,
Aye.
Mr. Needleman,
Aye.
Ms. Sarsfield,
Aye.
Ms. Lipinski,
Aye.
Dr. Taratusky.
Aye. Number 5, HB Communications, Inc. The Board of School Directors approves HB Communications, Inc. to perform all work associated with the installation of a new distributed antenna system to boost cell phone signal coverage throughout the new Enfield Elementary School in the amount not to exceed $98,343. Is there a motion
Motion.
and a second?
Second.
Any comments or questions?
If we could just go over for the public a little bit about, because this is a kind of a high ticket item and I read through it, but the public might not have that access. And I just thought it might be good to kind of discuss why we're doing this.
Sure, I'd be happy to answer that. And I know Rich Oliver is on the call in case I missed something technological. Again, I'm a former English teacher here. So we were having cell phone service concerns around the new building, primarily in the main office area, as well as the front of the building. These concerns were really safety concerns in the event of an emergency, being unable to have calls either come in or go out. And so as a result, we asked Mr. Oliver to do some research into remedies, and this is the remedy. It is, you may or may not recall, this is part of the project cost. And so it's not additional funding that the district, it's within the budget that had already been created for the project. Mr. Oliver, is there anything you want to add there?
Yeah, just in cohort with Mr. Thorne, what it does is takes the actual signal that's in the air outside of the building. So it has antennas on the roof, and inside it distributes that signal throughout the building. So any place you are, you do have cell service for using our safety program, the RUVNA, emergency calls, or other pieces in the district. So you're absolutely on target, Dr. Yanuko.
Thank you, Mr. Oliver.
Thank you.
Absolutely.
Thank you both. Are there any other questions?
I just want to make one other comment, and Mr. Oliver or Dr. Yanuko, correct me if I'm misspeaking here, but we talked about this in property committee meeting a couple of times, and we did explore alternative remedies that would be less expensive for the district, including having the cell phone providers invest, which was met with anticipated resistance. So given the safety impacts and school safety being such a high priority for this group, I, as part of the property committee, am very supportive of the approach we're taking here.
Thank you. Okay, any other comments or questions? Okay, all right, Ms. Michaels.
Mr. Bedard,
Aye.
Mr. DeFranco,
Aye.
Dr. Etlin,
Aye.
Mr. Needleman.
Aye.
Ms. Sarsfield,
Aye.
Ms. Lipinski,
Aye.
Dr. Taratusky.
Aye. Okay, at this time, we will have an opportunity for public comments on non-agenda items. Again, if you wish to speak, you can use the hand raise feature. We'll call on you, and if you could just share where you are in the township and share your comments with us. Okay, Lee Aberley, you can unmute, or we'll call on Lee Aberley.
Hello, can you hear me okay?
Yes, we can, Lee. Thank you.
Hi, good evening, school board. I just wanted to ask, and well, probably start off with a comment. I'm in,
I'm
sorry,
sorry.
yeah, sorry,
Could you let us know where you are located in the district?
I'm on
Sorry.
Jarden Road in Winmore.
Okay, thanks.
No problem. Firstly, just a comment around, partly around Damien's presentation, but as the parent of a child with a low incidence disability, I've really appreciated the opportunity to have my child attend 4 days a week since September. It's been an absolute blessing. I feel really, really grateful to have been in that position. So I really appreciate everything the administration have done to make that happen. So that's my first comment, but just around the presentation and the discussion around the Spartan Academy. My child who's in the school district is in 3rd grade and he will be attending ESY. So would they be able to attend Spartan Academy in addition to that, or is that instead of? So Dr. Johnson, I don't know if you can answer that.
I sure can. So I'm working with Dr. Van Voren, Lee, to look at all kinds of options for all of the students who attend our school district. That may include extending ESY for some students for an additional couple of weeks, our extended school year program for those students with significant disabilities. That may be an option. Finding ways to make this an inclusive program is certainly a priority also. So Dr. Van Voren and I are doing that hand in hand. We spoke about it just as recently as 4 o'clock this afternoon.
Okay, that's really good to know. No, thank you. I wasn't sure how to fill in the survey because I wasn't sure if it was applicable or not. So I'll fill it in. But
that would be helpful.
Yeah. Obviously, we would be probably super interested, and my child well enough to know that he loves going to school. So anything to do that. And just thank you for sharing the data. I did actually have a question just around the high school data that you shared with the missing the students that did not that missed out, I guess, on graduation. Does that include students who would be graduating as part of ESY? So it's not really, I guess they sort of graduate outside of their typical class year, or does that not include those students?
So that's a great question, Lee. Our students who have disabilities who stay in school from the time that they're 18 to 21 are still graduating on time. They're just waiting to receive their diploma until their 21st year.
Okay, all right. No, that's really helpful. No, thank you. And it was a lovely presentation. Thank you so much for sharing that.
Thanks, Lee.
Thank you, Lee. Are there any other public comments? Megan Markle.
Hi, everybody.
Hi, Dr. Markle.
Hi, I don't have a question or a comment. I have more of a comment. I just wanted to thank the board and Dr. Yanuko for this awesome opportunity. And I promise to work hard and lead with integrity. And I really believe strongly in this school district. And I'm very excited for this opportunity. So I just wanted to thank you all.
You're quite welcome. Congratulations.
Thank you.
All right. Any other comments from the public? Okay. All right, our future meeting dates. There's a regular school board meeting scheduled for Tuesday, April 20th, 2021 at 7 p.m., which is a virtual meeting. An interim board meeting on Tuesday, May 4th, 2021 at 7 p.m., which is also a virtual meeting. There's a finance committee meeting on Thursday, April 22nd at 8 a.m., and that will be a virtual meeting. And also just a reminder that next Thursday for April 15th, there will be the virtual meet and greet with Dr. Markle and the equitable practices meeting on Wednesday, April 21st at 6:30 p.m. in the evening. Okay. Thank you all very much for attending and appreciate everyone's comments this evening. Take care. We're adjourned.